Niemann.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. My name is JJ Niemann. I'm 24 years old currently. My birthday is next week though, so I'm about to be 25. Yeah, so I've spent the past 2.5 years and change in Book of Mormon. I joined very similar because you recently had Jake Smith on the podcast, right?
I did.
Yeah, who I went to school with for 2 years. And so very similar to him, I actually started basically right after I graduated college. I joined Book of Mormon 3 days after my college graduation, which was really wild. And so since then, I was in the show for 2.5 years. And then I recently departed the show to do a world premiere of a new musical called Bliss at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle that I've been doing the readings and workshops and development stuff for. Which is hopefully coming to New York when all of this is over. That's the plan. So, and then, yeah, right after that ended, I started quarantining. So I'm currently in North Carolina in Wilmington, where I grew up doing theater back in my childhood home, but I've kind of like redone my room and stuff. So that's been nice.
Who play in Book of Mormon for our viewers?
So I was a swing, which means that I cover all of the ensemble tracks in the show. So I technically played 7 different roles or tracks. And so that meant that basically it took a while to get them all under my belt, but I had like 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsal. So I had more rehearsal before being put into the show than someone who was just going into one role. They usually have 2 weeks. But I had like 4 weeks. So, yeah, we basically just would tackle them one at a time. And so, like, the day that I booked the show, which was, like, the day after my callback, go to the music room at 3 o'clock. And so I literally, like, started that day and signed the papers and started music rehearsals. And that basically, like, you're sitting down in a room with the, associate music director or the music director. And they literally just plunk through basically your track, like one track for the whole show, because you're doing 7 unique vocal parts. And then you also are doing like unique tracking when it comes to costume changes and lines and your choreography and where you are on the show. And then each role has like a bunch of different features. So yeah, it definitely is a lot under the belt, but it was an interesting experience because you think about being put into a show as like, I don't know, you assume that everyone's going to be at rehearsal, but I literally was like in a room and just had to record all the vocal tracks and then like basically learn them on my own. And then with the dance captain and me in a studio for weeks, it was just him being like, okay, so you go from this number to this number to this number. You're going to partner with this person and this person. But I never got to do that until I like was on stage. I had like one mini put in rehearsal with like all of the other swings and stuff, but it wasn't like, I never had a full experience before just doing it on Broadway, and it was wild.
Who was your favorite character to cover, and then that you eventually went on for?
Yeah, I really liked playing Elder Grant and Elder Church when I had people there, because that character just happens to have like lines and solos in every scene, and he's a lot of times like at the front of formations and stuff, so that's just a good one for people to see. But then I also there's like 1 or 2 tracks in the show that don't have to do all the crazy dancing, and some days when you're just like really tired, you're just like, I'm glad I don't have to do that and that today and do that crazy quick change and things like that. So sometimes that's nice too.
With Book of Mormon, obviously being Book of Mormon, having a lot of adult humor in it, what is something that like it's a selling point when you have friends that have kids? Like, should I come bring my kid to the show? What do you like tell people who like for a younger audience?
Right. I mean, you'd be shocked. We sometimes have like 8-year-olds or like in the front row, and the content that we have to say and do on stage. If you've seen the show, you said you saw the tour. I mean, imagine like having an 8-year-old in the front row and you're like, oh my God. And like the Ugandan ensemble is having to say all of these things, and they're just like, this is so uncomfortable. Like, why do you have your kid there? And sometimes they'll be like, oh my gosh, like they'll like close their ears, and sometimes the moms or whoever's with them will just be like, like they don't even care. But yeah, I mean, I definitely would say the sensitive content. I mean, like, I was even scared to have my parents see the show for the first time because they're very like religious and conservative. And so I was just like, oh my God. But they knew exactly what they were getting into. So I think that's the thing. So many tourists and people don't know what they're getting into when they buy a ticket to it, which is weird because it's been open for so long, but that still happens.
Yeah, I think it's been open so long because I took my friend to come see it, and just they fell in love with the score because like the orchestrations and the way that the music
So good.
sounds, it's so good, and that's why obviously it won Best Musical. But and with that being said, as an actor, that's probably normal for you. Like, oh, I'm acting, like I'm doing this. This is my material. I don't actually mean what I'm saying, but like with that material, is there truth in it? In the show, like, is there like a moral message that you take away from it as an actor?
Yes, yeah, it's really a treat to get to do a show 8 times a week that is just good. Like, is just so well written, so funny. And that's the thing with Book of Mormon is that like, I don't consider myself a comedian or a comedic actor. Like, that's not my first strong suit. And I feel really funny doing that show. Like, you don't have to try so hard to make the stuff work. You just have to deliver it earnestly and what it calls for. And there's something so special about that. And also just getting to do a show where the music's so good. There is a lot of like, I feel like mass produced musicals at this point, or like things just being cranked out that are to be commercial success. And I think the beauty of Book of Mormon is that they legitimately didn't think that it would be, and it is. And I will say recently it's been coming under a lot of fire, and as a white person, I definitely don't have the place to be able to say if something is like too racist or not racist enough or whatever. That's not my place to say, but I will say that the show, if you really look at the material and what's in it, yes, there are negative depictions or for comedic effect of people, but it kind of does that to everyone. It's like an even playing field and makes fun of everything and everyone. And I think the beauty of it also is at the end, like, all of the Africans are like, no, we don't believe this. Like, we were just choosing to believe it because it is it makes us happy and gives us hope, and like, we're not stupid. Like, we know that all of this is lies and fake. And I think that that's the beauty of it, is that like in the end it flips the script, and you thought the whole time that like the white people, the white saviorism, which has become like such a thing, on people going on mission trips and stuff, you think that like it's the white people saving them, but they're like, no, honey, like, we're not stupid. Like, it flips the script at the end. It does such a good job with that. So I think that that's something that's really special and kind of ties it all together at the end. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With you say you have the privilege of the privilege of doing it 8 times a week. I ask all my guests, what is it like doing it 8 times a week and finding ways to make it new? How did you make it new every night, or A, make it new every night, and B, also take care of yourself doing it 8 times a week?
Definitely trial and error. I definitely can't claim to have always taken the best care of myself. I think that that's something I really had to learn, especially coming right out of college. You're in a very different environment, and you have to learn what your body can and can't do. And so, as a swing, it's kind of a treat to not have to be on necessarily every show of the week, and when you do go on, you're doing different roles, so it actually keeps it really fresh. I don't feel like I ever got too complacent or too used to it to not be challenged at all, because sometimes you're going on for a role and you're like, wow, I haven't done this in 2 months, and like, it feels like a different show. Truly, you interact with different people, you're doing different things, you're saying different things, so I think that that really helps with keeping it fresh. So anyone who feels that way, I definitely like, work on swinging in those skills, because I think it's awesome. But yeah, I think I had to learn that like dieting was an important thing, and also like you're burning so many calories in the show, but like being strong, and like having strong core and exercising outside of the show is really important, because you can't just rely on the show to do that. You can't just jump on stage without warming up physically, without warming up vocally. And I ended up getting like an injury or two, and some of those things sometimes are inevitable when you do it so much. And so those kind of things really were wake-up calls for me, like pulling my back from having to do like a handstand kind of jump thingy, and not warming up properly, and then having to be out of the show for a whole weekend. And that's a minor injury. So many people, experience harder things. But I definitely like those kind of things. Or also not taking, when I joined the show, I didn't take voice lessons for a whole year. And I ended up developing a lot of bad habits because I wasn't practicing putting my voice in a good alignment to be singing these crazy tenor things. So I ended up having to like deal with that and go back into voice lessons and kind of retrain how to sing the show healthily. So I would say, like, do not make those mistakes, but sometimes you just have to like experience those things for yourself and see how it works, and fix it and make a change.
With being in the, one of my dreams is to be in the ensemble of Book of Mormon, and you said tenor. What are some what are like the vocal ranges? Like, what's some tips for being in the ensemble? Like, I hear Book of Mormon, I feel like is that show you have to be a triple threat. So what are some tips you can give for people that like, just want to be in the ensemble for Broadway shows?
Yeah. Well, every show, I mean, for Book of Mormon is obviously very specific in its type of people that it looks for, but a lot of other shows, like, I feel like a show for every type, if that makes sense. And I feel like you can't force something to work. And there have been a lot of things that I've been in like final callbacks for and this close, but like at the end of the day, I wasn't perfect for that. Like for Moulin Rouge, like I definitely could do that show, but there's people who are better suited for what they need in that. And, obviously, so I say that for everything. But being in the ensemble is freaking awesome and is very cool. And I think as much as you can, spend every day, like in quarantine currently, like I'm trying to like warm up almost every day. I'm trying to stretch and maintain my flexibility. Like, you have to kind of go out of your way to do those kind of things, to be ready for that, like when that right job and that right audition and that right callback happens, like that you're like able to go in and nail it. But yeah, the tenor, the range in Book of Mormon is easily, I mean, it is the hardest show I have ever sung. That is hands down the truth. And also that has to do with that I'm singing literally at the bottom and the top of my range because I'm covering the bass tracks and the tenor one tracks. So it's a pretty rangy show. And so that was a hard thing, was that I could never get comfortable enough to be like, oh, I like feel comfortable singing this, because then I'd go on the next day and sing the complete opposite of that range and have to like adjust, It's tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some weird stories that you have from like performance, whether because it's there's a little mess up or backstage shenanigans? What's a little fun story you can share?
Yeah, I mean, the backstage shenanigans at Book of Mormon are real, and like we literally have a changing area in the basement where we have like games basically that are like chutes and ladders, and if you win like different rounds, like we do that every single time we're down there changing, we're playing a different game, and that keeps it really fun. And then we have pieces, one of our costumers made pieces that have our faces on it, so you like can go up the ladders basically to win, and then like whoever loses has to bring donuts and stuff. So we do fun stuff like that. And then like the biggest swing mishap the story that I tell or that sticks in my head is basically one show I was swung on, and we have like the spooky Mormon Hell Dream demon costume, and depending on what track you're in, you're wearing like literally 2 costumes under that. So you are wearing your entire Mormon costume underneath, and then it all zips and snaps up basically. And so my zipper broke one show, and so my entire like Mormon, white shirt, black tie, everything was just like open, and I had to do the whole beginning of the number like that, then run off stage and get safety pinned basically to close it so that you couldn't see it. And then I went back on stage. My costume got caught on one of the little like tracks that are platforms that are on the rolling tracks, and I knocked it out of the track, and it started rolling off stage like with me on it, like we're like supposed to be frozen, and I literally was like slowly rolling off the stage. So anyway, all of that was happening, and my dance teacher from my childhood was front row center. She won the lottery for that show, and she was in the front row, and she said she didn't even notice any of it. And I was like, wow, that's the beauty of live theater, because also there's so much going on. There's lights, there's smoke and haze, so it's like she couldn't even tell. But to me, that was like ridiculous. And then I had to quick change out of it after like getting the safety pins off, when you have literally 10 seconds to quick change out of that. So pretty wild.
What's that? Like you said, the beauty of live theater. What is the Eugene ONeill Theater like? That's a beautiful space. What's it like? Just calling that home for 2.5 years.
Yeah, well, the Broadway theaters are like very old, and I will say Eugene ONeill needs to get renovated, just because the backstage, like if you think about the amount of dust and like mold and like things like that at the end, like we are not the only theater. There are a lot of other theaters that haven't been recently renovated or cleaned, and I think that happens every time there's a new show in there. So I think that when something's really long running, it hasn't gotten like the theater hasn't gotten its proper treatment. But the theater itself is beautiful, and it's very tight quarters backstage, so everything is very choreographed. Like there's less backstage space there than there is at my like college theater, at my community theater here in North Carolina. Like it's kind of wild what they're able to do with that space when you design a set for that space, and like everything's just like flown up and everything at all times. Like if you're singing backstage, you're literally up against the wall because there's set pieces being brought down and put in tracks, and it's a very well-oiled machine. But swinging that was difficult because you're like, I literally cannot be in the way because people are walking through. You have this big hallways with costumers with baskets of costumes having to bring it all the way around, and like if you're not, you can't be in the way. So that definitely was interesting, and I've never experienced such close quarters backstage at a theater before. But the theater itself was really nice, and I like how it's a smaller Broadway theater, so it's very intimate, and like you can actually see like so much of the audience, which is nice.
What about a last question before we wrap up here? What are some stage door shenanigans? Like, what's it like? Just what does it mean to you as an actor, a Broadway actor now, being on the other side of a stage door? Because I'm sure every theater kid goes to the stage door when they see shows, and they're like, I want to be on the other side of that. And then you're finally on the other side of that, like right out of college. What's that like?
It was really cool, and a lot of my, anytime I had like parents or family come, and they would like, they would always like film or like take pictures as I was signing because they thought it was the coolest thing, and it really is. And specifically the first few times was really special. I mean, it never honestly gets old, and the amount of people who also make fan art, like Book of Mormon has a pretty nice fan base, and the amount of people who would do art, like I had an entire wall in my dressing room covered with art from people. And like, that is just the coolest thing to me. And obviously theater is something that like I went into because I love to do it. And I think the beauty of theater is that a lot of people also go into it not to become like actual famous, like TV, movie level famous. And people remain humble. Like the leads of our shows were humble, and like nobody is a diva, and that's something that I think is so special and awesome. So even when you're like doing the stage door, it still doesn't feel like you're like it doesn't feel like you're a celebrity. It doesn't feel like you're like anything, but it is like the childhood version of you, and remembering like, wow, when I was little, like I was at the stage door for Newsies meeting Carol Lindsay, or like meeting Patina Miller at Pippin, or like Jeremy Jordan, and just being like, that was so special to me. And like maybe for someone that's going to be special for them, and they'll look back at that picture one day, so that is really cool, like a full circle moment.
No, yeah, especially you hit it. Most people that I know don't do theater to become famous. They do it because they genuinely love to tell a story. I always say that there's a difference when you do TV, you're acting for a final product. Theater, you're doing it live. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anything can happen, and I think you shared your stories about the beauty of live theater, and as well as the humility that comes with being a Broadway actor at a stage door. But JJ, thank you so much for coming on and meeting with me and talking.
Thank you. This has been so fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff and like remember that there was a time and will be a time when we get to do all of this again, you know?
Exactly. And, we just got to stay patient, do our part. And, especially in times right now, I want to say one thing. I appreciate you using your platform, because I follow you on Instagram, using your platform, using your voice. It's powerful, especially in times like this. It's also really great to, acknowledge where we stand in as ourselves and in society. So I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. And, I'll let you know when this episode drops, and, take care of yourself, enjoy the time with the family, enjoy being back home. And hopefully I get to see you if Bliss comes to New York. And if you're in it, maybe I'll swing by. I graduated high school, so I got a New York trip once this is all open. So we'll see.
Good. Yay. I can't wait.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Instagram at Campfire Series Podcast for awesome updates and just a good time. We'll see you next week. I'm Logan Soferenko, signing off.